On today's show, NBA Power Rankings Elite of the East edition. Are the Cavs on fraud watch after their playoff struggles? Who replaces Boston and Indiana at the top of the Eastern Conference? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And joining me is my partner in crime, the host of Locked On Heat, David Ramil. David, how wide open is the Eastern Conference this next season in your eyes?
Pretty wide open, I'd say. There seems to be just a number of teams that are kind of tierless. We were going to do our power rankings for today's episode, and at the same time, you look at the best teams in the East, and you can make an argument for up to like 6 teams that might be within the top 2 or 3 of the Eastern Conference. And I don't know that we have a clear-cut favorite, and so much can change based on what we project will happen in the regular season and what we expect in the postseason as well. So there are a lot of variables to take in consideration, and I'm looking forward to discussing it on today's episode.
Absolutely. If you missed our episode with David and I last week, we did our power rankings for the top 5 teams in the Western Conference. This is our second in this series of episodes that we'll be doing, kind of power ranking both conferences. So go check that out if you want to see the way we rank the top 5 of the West.
But I will add, though, I think we should, if you're going to go check out last week's episode, make sure that you're in total agreement with what we said there, because we're never wrong, and all of our power rankings are absolutely infallible, as they will be moving forward on part 2 of this series.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Of course, we want to thank you for making Locked On your first listen each and every single day. David, getting into the nitty gritty here, taking a look at the top of the Eastern Conference. Again, a lot of change to be expected in the Eastern Conference this upcoming season. Teams like the Celtics, the Pacers, the Bucks are going to look wildly different this time around, all losing key contributors either due to injury, with Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton both going to miss either the entirety of this next year or significant chunks at a minimum. No more Damian Lillard for the Bucks. So there should be a decent amount of change at the top of the East. Let's go with the team that was on top of the East, though, this most recent go around. Do you have the Cavs as your number 1 power ranked team in the East starting the season, or is it another team? Where are you at with number 1?
It's still the Cavaliers. I think they've proved that they can win consistently. I like the changes that Kenny Atkinson brought last season. I like the fact that there's going to be the core of that team is basically moving forward. They get another year of DeAndre Hunter. They brought in some new players as well, and Lonzo Ball. And I just think that they're going to be able to address a lot of the same things that they didn't do well in last year's postseason. But I still see them as clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference as far as what we'll expect from them in the regular season. The question is, and it's been a couple seasons in a row now, what version of the Cavaliers do you see in the postseason? Because this year it seemed like they were rolling. They had it seemed like they had everything completely figured out during the regular season. And then that opening series against Miami, and that might be more of a reflection of how bad the Heat were rather than how good the Cavs were, but they absolutely historically beat them into the ground. And then you thought that they were going to be able to roll through the rest of the Eastern Conference. That was not the case. And so I think there are still lingering questions about whether or not the Cavs are going to be just a regular season paper tiger, or whether or not they're going to be a team that's good enough to actually contend for a title. So to me, I think that they're still the best team in the East, but there are still a lot of questions regarding what happens in the postseason, and there's no way for us to answer those correctly. Now, we can only guess and assume that they're going to be able to figure things out, but mostly it takes teams being able to kind of retain the roster, because when you have that look of change, and this is where it kind of is a good thing that you don't change things. I don't think they need to tweak the roster. I think they have as good a roster as any in the NBA. They might have the better team on paper, perhaps, than, or at least good enough to contend with, say, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They just haven't been able to translate that talent into postseason success, but I think they're certainly good enough to do so. And we're just not going to be able to know exactly how good this team actually is unless they have a far deeper playoff run than they did last year.
So Cavs brought back Sam Merrill on a new 4-year deal. They added Lonzo Ball and Larry Nance Jr., and the only departing players are Ty Jerome and Isaac Okoro. I like the moves that the Cavs made this offseason. No major changes. Lonzo and Larry Nance Jr., some great depth pieces. I'm stuck on the Cavs because I think I agree with you that they should be ranked number 1 and that they will likely be the leading wins getter in the Eastern Conference again in the regular season throughout. They're one of the younger teams. They don't have these, potential, I guess, like major injury concerns or depth concerns. They should be the far and away leader in the regular season. But I also kind of wonder, now that some of the shine has worn off a little bit on Kenny Atkinson, he elevated this Cavs team to a level they hadn't really reached before under JB. And I'm torn because I like the additions that the Knicks have made as well. And now that the Knicks bringing in Mike Brown, I wonder if there's going to be some of that, I don't know what to call it, new coach smell, if you will, they come in and, maybe that's like the uptick that the Knicks get, and where maybe the Cavs come back down to earth a little bit. The Knicks jump forward a little bit. I mean, New York posted 51 wins in the regular season this past year. The Cavs were at 64. Maybe, Cleveland regresses a little bit. New York improves a little bit, and they're kind of more neck and neck right there in the middle, competing for that 1 seed out east. I think conventional wisdom tells you go with the Cavaliers, but exactly to the point that you made, man, the concerns about their postseason issues. And I know you can point to this past postseason talking about, okay, they got, a bad hand dealt to them with some of the injuries, Mobley and Garland missing some time in the postseason against the Pacers, but they also choked tremendously against Indiana, right? They were far and away the favorites in that series, and they choked up. They choked horribly at home, right? So I know we're factoring in, I guess, just the regular season power rankings where this team should lie. But that's my question to you is this Cavs team on fraud watch, right? What do they need to do? And what can they do to come out and prove? Because they dominated in the regular season this past year, and then they got to the playoffs and they screwed up again. Like what can this Cavs team do differently? Because it's the same bones, it's the same players. You said they don't need to make a change there. They already made a change with coaching. What more can be done? Or do they just need to run it back for the 4th or 5th time here with this same core?
You know what? I've got to be honest with you. I'm not a believer in fraud watch, and that idea that a team has to win a championship in order to prove that they're a legitimately good team. And maybe it's just by virtue of my age or having seen some of those, at least in the era that I grew up in, the 90s basketball and the aughts and stuff like that, seeing really, really good teams that were always this close to being able to win a championship, whether it was the New York Knicks or, other teams along the Indiana Pacers, if you recall those. But obviously Michael Jordan, the Bulls, always standing in their way. And so you get this idea, and I think it was built by more than anything by Michael Jordan reminding you, I've got the rings, I've got the way of proving that I'm a better player, better team, or whatever. At the same time, the Boston Celtics were on fraud watch until they won the championship, but I would have been perfectly fine of just saying, you know what, they're a really good team. And I think you depend on so much on luck to win a championship more than anything else. I think talent gets you there, but you need a lot of luck to get there as well. And I really do believe that you can't dismiss how good the Cavs are simply just because they haven't been able to secure a championship or even go on a deep playoff run, because sometimes things just don't break your way, as you said before. I don't know. So to me, they're not frauds. I still think that I'd like to see them go on a deeper run. I mean, I'd be much more convinced of whether or not they're a legitimate title contender in that sense. But I still view them that way. At least that's my perspective, is that they're title contenders until proven otherwise. And just because of the continuity that they've been able to retain, the talent they have on their roster and everything else. So to me, I still see them clearly as the best team in the Eastern Conference.
Well, in a wide open East that's been ravaged by injuries and some other roster changes, maybe that's all the luck the Cavs need to be able to go on a deep postseason run, potentially a title run this upcoming year. So we're in agreement on our number one ranked power ranked team going into this next season for the Eastern Conference. What about spots 2 and 3? How far will the Boston Celtics fall in our power rankings? Will they make the top 5 cut? We're going to talk about those teams coming up here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Look, when I first got my hands on Monarch Money, I'll admit I was a little embarrassed and frankly frustrated with myself and how much money I realized that I was spending on food. I'm talking like dining out at restaurants, getting fast food, ordering delivery, carry out, all this stuff. Now I budget smarter and I save more. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your very first year. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA. Thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go check out the Locked On Show for your favorite team. Maybe go tune into Locked On Cavs. See if Danny Cunningham over there believes the Cavs should be on fraud watch, or the fraud watch that David dismissed in segment 1. I gotta see the Cavs try and get out of the second round of the playoffs, man. Donovan Mitchell still hasn't made it out of the second round of the playoffs in his career. That's at some point that becomes a conversation.
Fair enough.
All right. Number 2 spot in the Eastern Conference. I kind of feel like there's a clear favorite here for number 2, as much as we've been teeing up this whole idea that the East is wide open. I think it's kind of like the 2 teams that have remained intact after this past season. Are we in agreement here, David? New York Knicks, number 2?
Yeah, that's what I see too, because I think they've shown their mettle over the last couple seasons. And while I'm not a believer in the new coach Schmel, at least when this particular coach is involved, I still think that they're a good enough team. And again, that continuity is vital for them to continue to move forward. And not only that, but they also made some positive changes to their roster.
Yeah, the additions of Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele, I think, will be big kind of depth pieces. That seems like a recurring trend this offseason. I think teams really are keying in on this idea that depth is more important now than ever
100%.
to survive that 82 game grind, and then potentially what you hope is a 16 game playoff run, or surviving multiple 7 game series throughout the postseason. And so I really liked the Jordan Clarkson pickup. I think that there were certainly points where when Jalen Brunson was on the bench, the Knicks were certainly starved for some offensive playmaking, some scoring pop. Miles McBride was able to provide that at times, but not nearly as consistently as they needed. And so now you have Mike Brown too, a coach who, unlike Tom Thibodeau, hopefully isn't going to grind his top, 6 or 7 guys into dust by the end of the postseason, or by the start of the postseason, I should say. And the Knicks are a team that they have like a kind of I don't want to say a surprising amount of depth, but they've got some talent behind their starting unit, as so much so to the point where, like, if you do take advantage of some of that depth throughout the regular season, maybe you get a fresher, starting unit. Maybe you get, more rest for Brunson, for Cat, for some of your heavy hitters, to keep them better prepared going into the postseason. But at the end of the day, I think the Knicks, it's hard for me to say, like, what to you was the biggest weakness for the Knicks and ultimately their undoing against the Pacers? Or was it just the Pacers were the better team and they just couldn't keep up with them?
I don't want to ever pinpoint it on one player in particular, but I think they didn't get the kind of production that they might have needed in the past from a guy like Brunson. And Karl Anthony Towns, I think, was really disappointing to me. Like, there were just moments there where I think, for all that he was able to contribute in spurts, and he's so good as an offensive player, there were just moments there where I watching those games, it felt like, had I been a Knicks fan, I would have been extremely disappointed to see the consistency, the inconsistency on the defensive side. Like, you never expect him to be a good defender, but there were moments there where he was just like seemed disinterested, like that he's indifferent to what's happening on the floor. And that's the exact lack of leadership that you need from one of the best players in the league. Like, he is that talented and you expect more from him. He's that good. He's that capable. And so I think it's talents. Like, that would be, maybe there's more to it than just that, but I think there were just moments there where he kind of threw the game away by not being able to provide as much as they need. And then you have to go to Mitchell Robinson. You go to that well a little bit too often, and you're sacrificing a bulk of your scoring to do so. So I think the point that you bring up at having depth is a vital one, because now you can change things around with the Yabusele. And I'm not a believer necessarily that he's going to be a huge swing factor, but it just adds something. And you need to be able to go and add something a little different, because you can't continue to count, I think, at least in my opinion, on Towns being the consistent presence that he should be at this point in his career.
You might not be as bought in on Mike Brown, but I'm very excited, especially after seeing some of the offensive things that he ran in Sacramento. I'm very curious to see what he accomplishes with Brunson, with Cat, because there were certainly points where the offense looked a little rough around the edges for the Knicks. Sure. So we'll see what he's able to take care of there. But that gives us our spots 1 and 2 here, and this is where things are going to get really interesting here, because now I think we're breaking away from any level of conventional wisdom, and it really does become super wide open. With that 3 spot, who do you have coming in at 3rd on your power rankings in the East, David?
This is where it gets really hard. Like last week, I think we were kind of pretty clear on who 2 through 4 were. I don't know that you have a clear-cut option, and so
I think I have a clear-cut option. I think I've had a clear-cut option. You want me to go first?
Who do you think is the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference, and you're that convinced of why they're the best team or the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference?
I think it's the Orlando Magic.
That's who I have too. That doesn't mean I'm convinced of it. They can really craft a bet. I mean, we're talking about a team that barely generated 90 points per game, it seems like, on multiple occasions. They shot, poorly from 3-point range, and so much of the league is dependent on being able to generate offense easily. And for a team that defends as well as they do, well, they could have never scored enough points to help balance it. I mean, yes, they underwent injuries and they had a really rough regular season. Maybe things will turn around. Are you that convinced that the addition of Desmond Bane over Cole Anthony and anything else you had on the roster, or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, is enough to kind of put you over the hump and make you that much better of an offensive team?
I honestly, I am. Yeah. So like here really quickly, right? So they extended Paolo Banchero. They brought back Mo Wagner. They added Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones, and they lost Cole Anthony, KCP, and Gary Harris. To me, I think that obviously you look at, so the injury stuff definitely derailed the start of their season, right? Losing Banchero, then Franz Wagner goes on that crazy run, then you lose Franz Wagner, and like they dealt with a lot of adversity throughout the regular season. I think that team was a lot better than their 41-41 record reflected. They are clearly a top defense. They will be another top defense. Adding Desmond Bane gives them a much needed offensive boost to help them out, right? Getting a guy that is more than capable of shouldering, a significant offensive load at times. I mean, hell, we saw Desmond Bane at times stepping into being a first option for the Memphis Grizzlies at times when Ja Morant was out, when he was on a heater, that kind of stuff. And, he's going to be playing, some nights he'll be the second option. Some nights he might be, he might step into the driver's seat if he's really on fire and let, Banchero take a bit more of a backseat. But I like that 3-headed monster of Banchero, Wagner, and Bane, as far as just the talent, how they kind of complement each other. And then the defense around those 3 guys, health permitting, I really like this Orlando Magic team. Like, I'm bought in on it. I think that they're going to surprise a lot of people, given how kind of, how I guess they disappointed this previous season. But I'm also just a big believer in defensive teams, right? Like, I know the offense wasn't great last year and things did at times look clunky. Even once Banchero and Wagner got healthy and were sharing the floor, there were all sorts of narratives and, numbers being thrown around. Can these 2 guys coexist? Do they actually make each other better? I think they're going to figure it out. I think that their skill sets should, in theory, be complementary of one another. And adding Desmond Bane only makes life easier for those 2 guys. There will be less pressure on them to shoulder so much of the offensive burden for that group. So I really like the Magic. I'm convinced of it that they will, at a minimum, be a home court advantage team in the playoffs. But I think I have them squarely as number 3 in the East.
Yeah, that's where I kind of wound up as well. But can't say I feel great about the decision. I think like the things you described all seem like positives, but it's just so much of it still depends to me on proving that they are not just a young team with a lot of talent that can be more consistent. And I don't know that Bane is ready for that responsibility, because it's one thing to kind of shoulder that load in replacing John Morant, knowing that you don't have to carry the team every day, and maybe this is your chance to shine. I think it'll be a little different with him being the focal point of Orlando's offense, or at least one of them. Like Banchero's still going to get his, Wagner's still going to get his. And seeing how the three play off each other, I think is going to be an interesting case study. I like what they've got built in Orlando. I love their coaching. I love the idea of what this team is built on and how they approach things on a day-to-day basis. But it's also, to me, just you need to see it a little bit more consistently and actually see that they're capable of taking this offensive leap that you described earlier. And if they can do that consistently, then I think based on the strength of their defense, they'll have a good chance of being a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. But I have them at third, but I'm not entirely convinced that they're the third best team in the Eastern Conference.
All right, so Dave is lukewarm on the Orlando Magic at third. I'm much more confident than he is at them finishing third in the East. That's 3 teams down. We've got 2 more to go. Who claims our 4th and 5th spots in the top of the Eastern Conference power rankings? Will the Celtics and Pacers just completely fall out of the picture? We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On NBA. David, we are down to the nitty-gritty here. We got 2 more spots in our top 5 Eastern Conference power rankings. Hit me with who you have at number 4, because this is where Celtics fans and Pacers fans are going to start sweating bullets, because with the losses to both of their rosters, man, I've molded around. I don't know. I don't know where your head is at. I don't know. I won't spoil it on my end, but give me who you got it for.
Yeah, I'm not sold on this team either. You got to pick somebody for this exercise, there could be up to like 6 teams that might be somewhere around this vicinity of the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference. In my view, eventually, I don't have Boston Celtics there. I think there's still questions about that roster and the injury concerns and whether Tatum returns or not. I don't know how good they're going to be. I don't have the Pacers there either, to be honest with you. They're not at the 4. They're not in my top 5. Maybe I'm letting the cat out of the bag a little too early. I think just falling off completely for me. So I'm looking at some of these younger teams, like the Orlando Magic, and the one I've got going in there is the Detroit Pistons. I think that they've made some real strides. I like Bickerstaff. I feel like he was scapegoated to a certain extent during his time in Cleveland. Maybe there's a ceiling to what he's capable of doing with a team, but I've always been a believer in how he raises the floor a lot. Maybe he doesn't necessarily raise the ceiling to the same degree that Pistons fans would love, and certainly not to the way the Cavs ownership wanted. But I think he's a good coach. I think he's a solid coach. He develops a culture. He gets them to buy in, and we saw this team, I think, take leaps and bounds from the group that they were not that long ago. And so they've got all the right pieces there. They added some nice players. They lost a couple of key rotation players, but I think overall they're still a really good team heading in the right direction. And I think both you and I are big believers in what Cade Cunningham is capable of, and see him as, I think, emerging into a top 10 player in the NBA. I think that's certainly where he's capable of being. And that being the case, those type of teams usually rise to the level of play of their greatest player. And I think Cunningham's going to be able to take him to the 4th spot.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I do agree that Cade is ascending into that territory, top 15-ish, maybe borderline top 10. I'm going to say top 15 for now.
Okay.
I really do like what Cade is growing into. He's clearly he's already an all-NBA caliber talent. They did lose Simon Fontecchio, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder, Lindy Waters, and obviously the stuff going on with Malik Beasley. They added Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson. They brought back Paul Reed. I think that they're going to really feel the loss of Malik Beasley. He balled out for them this past season. Like, he was huge for them. Now, maybe Jaden Ivey is able to replace some of that production. I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
they get some of that, maybe they replace Malik Beasley in the aggregate with guys like Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson. You kind of piecemeal him back together.
I think so.
I don't know. I'm torn on it. I don't know if I can comfortably say that they'll be fourth. I almost want to have them. I'm going to go with my fourth team, and then I can justify why.
All right.
I've got the Celtics at fourth.
Oh,
Believe it or not, I've got the Celtics at fourth. I think that Joe Mazzulla is going to find a way to still put wins, to put wins together for that team. I think that it gives Jaylen Brown like an opportunity, I guess, to kind of step forward and just be the guy, on a night-to-night basis, as opposed to being, interchangeable Batman and Robin with Jason Tatum, on a night-to-night basis. And honestly, the additions and subtractions of this Celtics team, this past offseason. So they lose Drew Holiday, they lose Luke Cornett, they lose Porzingis, right? But Porzingis, health issues, in and out of the lineup a ton already as is. Cornett, I think, is going to be a bigger loss than maybe they were anticipating or potentially. He was a great depth piece for them. And then Drew Holiday, as fantastic as Drew had been for the Celtics, right? He was getting up there in age and wasn't the same Drew Holiday that, he was when they won their title and all this stuff. So I don't think the losses are going to be as big as everybody is making them out to be. And the players that they added this offseason, they add George Niang, they add Luka Garza, they add Anthony Simons and Josh Minot. Like, I think that Joe Mazzulla is a talented enough coach, a capable enough coach, and I think there's still enough talent elsewhere on that Celtics roster that their identity of space and 3-point volume and all that is still going to translate at a high enough level. Some of this is also pending like a Jason Tatum return. Like if he comes back, February-ish, then I feel a little bit better about this take. If he's gone for the entire year, then I might have to drop the Celtics down a couple pegs, but I'm operating under the assumption that kind of maybe not quite the best case scenario for a Tatum return, but like somewhere like a middle of the pack return, assuming he's able to get up to speed and he's already out of the walking boot, he's moving around and everything. And so I've got the Celtics at fourth. I think that they'll still be able to maintain a lot of their defensive identity. And I think offensively, it's going to be a lot of responsibility on Jaylen Brown, obviously, but they still have Derek White. They still got Peyton Pritchard, bigger roles for both of those guys. Like, I don't think the Celtics are going to fall off as hard as, say, the Pacers, who really rely on Tyrese Halliburton, the straw that stirs the drink in Indiana.
Who's your starting center in Boston? Cada? I mean,
I guess. Yeah, that part's a little.
I just can't see it. Like, I mean, again, I understand maybe Porzingis was in and out of the lineup and you had to figure a way to adjust. But part of why you could figure a way to adjust with the loss of Porzingis or him being in and out of the lineup or even Holiday being in and out of the lineup is because you had both Tatum and Brown out there and Derek White, who was a very consistent, very good player.
And Al Horford.
Well, no, I'm not even going to say that because he's gone. So, now you're looking at, you have no depth. You have no Cornett, no Horford. And again, without one of the three of either White, Tatum, and Brown being available, I just don't see it. I don't know how you could do it. Like, I know he's going to tough his way out, and I understand he's going to probably get them to buy in 100%. But at some point, the lack of talent and depth is going to eat at this team. And maybe they can generate some sort of trade for Anthony Simons, maybe, if that's the case, or maybe he slides right in and provides some of the offense that they're going to be missing with Tatum. I suppose that's a possibility. But I don't know. I think there are too many glaring holes in the roster at certain positions, and that being the case, I'm not a believer that they're going to be able to stay at top five. Like that, they could be a 6 team, they could be a play-in team, and that's fine if they can weather that storm and they get Tatum back at a reasonable level of health for the playoffs. I'd still have them as one of the more dangerous teams and certainly capable of upsetting any of the top teams easily. We talked about fraud watch with the Cleveland Cavaliers. What if they face an 8th seed Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum at full strength? What a hell of a narrative that would be.
Oh my goodness, that would be a fun matchup, absolutely, and certainly, I guess, a possibility here. I will say, I kind of expect the whole of the Eastern Conference to be to take a step back as far as like win totals and stuff this next season. I think the couple teams at the top are going to be like leagues ahead, right? The Cavs, the Knicks, both probably going to be on pace for 60 plus wins next season, something crazy like that. And then I think every team after that is going to like struggle to even break 50 wins. And so that's where I think that you get like, I think that the Celtics can maybe make some ground, stay afloat on, feasting on some of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference, because there's a lot of bad that you can pick on in the Eastern Conference. And I think that those teams, the Celtics, are still not going to have many issues, if at all, handling, even with the lack of talent. So we'll agree to disagree on that one. And then for me, I'll go ahead and clock in number 5 here. I got the Pistons number 5. I do really like what Detroit has done. I am a big believer in Cade Cunningham. I do think that they will feel that loss of Malik Beasley. But ultimately, they are a young team. They're a talented team. They should continue to grow and get better. I just, please, like, for goodness gracious, like, JB, please play Asar Thompson much, much more. Like, just play him all the minutes. He deserves all the minutes. But seriously, like, some good additions with Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson, right? They add some shooting. They add some, secondary scoring and playmaking, to take some of the pressure off of Cade Cunningham. Getting Jaden Ivey back will be huge, healthy, all of that. See what his, trajectory continues to look like, because he was really showing some really positive signs this past season before getting hurt. And kind of trending in an upward trending in a really positive direction. So I'm going to go Pistons 5th, and I feel pretty good about Pistons at 5. Another defense team that should translate at a high level. And with Cade continuing to ascend as in, becoming one of the best players in the league, he's starting to show his ability, and he started to show it last year, right? His ability to really elevate a team in big moments, in playoff games, that kind of stuff. And so I really like what we're seeing from Cade. So I've got Pistons at 5th, rounding out my top 5. Who do you have at 5th?
At 5th, I've got the Atlanta Hawks. And you could have made a case for any of the teams, and this is where it does get certainly a little bit more difficult. Like Boston, you laid out a pretty good case. I don't think that they're a top 5 team, but I could see why you might think so if things break really, really well. But that's kind of the case for all these teams. Like even Milwaukee, I think, and they're not my 5th best team, obviously, but I think that the addition of Turner alongside an MVP level player in Giannis Antetokounmpo, yes, they suffered some key losses. Maybe that backcourt doesn't look great, and it does look like perhaps not the most talented core there to build around. And at the same time, I think Turner and Antetokounmpo are going to be a good pairing. I think it's.
Wait. You're telling me that you wouldn't want to build around Kevin Porter Jr.? What?
I know. Hot take there.
What a novel concept, man. Can we go back in time and tell the Rockets that 3 years ago that they shouldn't be trying to build around KPJ? My goodness.
Absolutely. You can even make a case for some of the other teams that we'll discuss the next time we bring up the Eastern Conference too. But yeah, I think the Hawks made some nice changes there, to bring in Porzingis. Okay, maybe that's too much to count on, but I liked the idea of what he brings as a center to this group, being able to stretch the floor, provide some rim protection. If he's healthy, just the idea of him being paired with Trae Young and being the excellent passer that he is, perhaps the best passer in the league, and the lob threat, the vertical threat that Porzingis still is, even at this stage of his career, I think is exciting. I think you bring in a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and you have some nice young defensive wings. Again, that Hawks team seemed like they had so many good defensive wings there, guys that would just bring intensity and change the course of the game. And I thought we were going to see them kind of just build towards something as the playoffs rounded up, and it just never worked out for them. But I think that they've leaned into it, and I think they're continuing to add the right players, build around the right players. And I like the way that they've just assembled this team, and you're going to get Jalen Johnson back. I think you've got a really good core there.
Luke Kennard, another name they added.
Yes, I'd forgotten about Kennard. Provides some valuable 3-point shooting depth there. Maybe doesn't replace what Bogdanovic provided for the team, but still, I like Kennard. Maybe he's not a great player at the salary that he had, but you know what? I still think he was a nice addition for this Hawks team. So they're my 5th best team in the Eastern Conference, and I think that they're going to surprise some people that might not be believers.
I went back and forth on Atlanta a lot in this exercise, and I was really torn on wanting to include them in the top 5, and I just kind of couldn't get all the way there. in part because
you've seen the talent too many times. That's what it is.
Yeah, like they just honestly, you know what that's what it is. Look, Missoula got me all his podcast appearances, and he's doing the circuit, and I'm a Missoula fanboy apparently. No, look, I like what the Hawks have on paper. I want to see how it translates on the court. I want to see if it can actually be consistently successful. I want to see what the defense looks like. I like the pieces that they put around Trey. It on paper, it looks like it should be a really good team, but I also thought that on paper they looked like they could be a really good team this past season, and then they messed around and they finished, in the 9th seed. So like I don't know how to evaluate this Hawks team right now. They've let me down too many times after their Cinderella run to the Eastern Conference Finals. I keep trying to be bought in on this Hawks team, and they keep disappointing me. So I'm going in with very low expectations, and I will be pleasantly surprised if I am wrong about this Atlanta Hawks team. But we want your top 5 rankings for the Eastern Conference, the elite of the East. Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Drop your top 5 list there. Again, go check out our first episode, the top 5 of the Western Conference. But for that's going to do it for our edition of Locked On NBA. Until next time, we'll catch you guys on our very next Locked On NBA episode.